In the year 2005, nestled deep within a remote farmhouse, lived a young woman. Her days were spent in quiet diligence, her nights in watchful care for her elderly grandmother, whose health had begun to falter. One particular afternoon, as slumber claimed her in a nap, a discordant, frantic scream shattered the rural stillness. Bolting upright, heart pounding, the young woman rushed to her grandmother's room, her bare feet padding silently on the aged wood floors. There, beneath the heavy, floral-patterned duvet, cowered the frail figure of her grandmother, trembling like a little girl who'd seen something monstrous in the dark. The young woman, whose name remains lost to the annals of this tale, knelt beside the bed, shaking her grandmother's shoulder gently at first, then more vigorously, demanding her attention. When the grandmother finally stirred, her eyes wide with lingering terror, she spoke in a voice that was thin and reedy, yet filled with an unnerving certainty. "I saw him," she whispered, clutching the sheets. "A red figure, standing by the door. I know what I saw. It was Satan." The young woman stared, her own fear momentarily forgotten. "Grandma, you're having a hallucination. It's not real. You're safe here." The grandmother shook her head vigorously, her frail body emanating a forceful conviction. "Never hallucinated before in my life," she insisted, her voice trembling but resolute. "I know what I saw. It was real." Intrigued and deeply concerned, the family sought medical help. They found a 67-year-old retired teacher, her face etched with confusion and fear. In the sterile quiet of the hospital room, she recounted her own harrowing visions. "Faces, odd-looking faces, hovering over me," she stammered. "But I'm not crazy. I know I'm not." Laboratory tests were conducted, meticulously ruling out the usual suspects, infection and drug interactions. The family, desperate and clutching at straws, had even consulted a priest about performing an exorcism days before they came to the hospital, their concern palpable. To help describe what plagued her visions, the woman painstakingly drew a picture. The faces, she explained, had unnervingly large teeth, eyes, and ears, stretched and flattened into a horizontally elongated shape, like a peculiar football come to life. After thorough evaluation, doctors determined the woman had a condition known as Charles Bonnet syndrome. Patients with this rare disorder experience vivid, often bizarre, visual hallucinations, typically when their actual vision is diminished. These hallucinations, however, are purely visual, no sounds accompany them. The woman's mind, sharp despite her age, perceived these disturbing images, utterly convinced of their reality. Music fades slightly, then begins again, this time with a melancholic edge. In 1995, a young man named Tomakata navigated the crushing weight of grief. His beloved mother had recently succumbed to cancer, and the void left in his life was immense. Consumed by sorrow, he retreated to the sanctuary of his bedroom, locking the door behind him. For days, he remained locked within, a prisoner to his despair. One fateful night, as a fitful sleep struggled to claim him, a sound jolted him awake. It was the distinct, ominous crackling of the wooden floorboards above him, as if an immense weight pressed down upon them. He froze, eyes darting upwards towards the doorway leading from the adjoining room. And then, he saw her. His mother. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the faint moonlight filtering through the window, watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Was it sorrow, judgment, or something else entirely? A primal scream tore from his throat, raw with disbelief and terror. The neighbors, alerted by his anguished cries, called the police. When officers arrived, Thomas' terror was palpable, his story fragmented yet terrifyingly clear. Doctors examined him, perplexed. No physical ailment explained such vivid, terrifying hallucinations. As far as anyone knows, Toma has never seen his mother's apparition again since that harrowing night. Music shifts tone, becoming more personal and unsettling. I remember this incident, though it happened long ago, when I was still very young, living in a small house with just my mom and me. Even at that tender age, I knew the comforting routine. Every night, Mom would check on me before retiring herself. One particular night, I woke with a start, convinced I heard a soft rustling emanating from the darkness within my closet. Just as I was about to call out, I looked up, towards the foot of my bed, and saw my mom. She was standing there, a strange, almost mischievous smile on her face, giving me a little wave. "Go back to sleep, sweetie," she whispered, her voice a familiar lullaby. Then, inexplicably, she turned and slipped silently into my closet, drawing the door just enough to leave a sliver of opening. I remember, with crystal clear clarity, seeing her single eye peering through that narrow gap, watching me. I giggled, mistaking her game for playful banter, and drifted back to sleep moments later. The next morning, bright and early, while enjoying my cereal, I nonchalantly mentioned, "Mom, you were hiding in my closet last night, peeking at me." She stopped mid-motion, her spoon suspended in the air. Her face contorted into a mixture of confusion, concern, and utter bewilderment. "What? No, honey," she stammered, her voice laced with disbelief. "I haven't been in your room all night. I thought maybe someone broke in, but you must have been dreaming, or hallucinating. It was just in your head." The explanation, while logical, did little to soothe the strange unease that settled in my chest. That single, vivid hallucination, innocent as it seemed in retrospect, was far creepier than anything I'd ever experienced before. In the years since, I've only had 2 other episodes, neither as vivid, nor as deeply unsettling as that night in my childhood bedroom. Music takes on a more weary, almost desperate feel. Years later, I found myself behind the wheel of a big rig, a life spent traversing highways under the cloak of night. Caffeine was my constant companion, a desperate elixir to keep fatigue at bay during those marathon runs. One particular night stands out in stark relief, however. I'd forgotten my coffee, a critical oversight I hadn't made in years. The miles stretched endlessly before me, the monotony of the road seeping into my consciousness. I drifted, my eyelids heavy, my grip on the steering wheel tenuous. Several times, I felt the truck pulling perilously close to the shoulder, and with a jolt of adrenaline, I wrestled the wheel back, narrowly averting disaster. Just as I thought I had wrestled back control, a new terror seized me. Glancing ahead, I saw a terrifyingly tall, imposing black figure materializing directly in the path of my speeding truck. Instinct screamed at me. I swerved violently to the left, just barely missing the silhouette, sending gravel scattering off the road. The sheer terror of the moment forced me to slam on the brakes, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. Panting, heart hammering against my ribs, I risked a glance in the left rearview mirror. The figure was still there, standing as if frozen in the middle of the deserted road. I wasn't generally a confrontational person, preferring to avoid conflict whenever possible. But something primal, something fierce and protective surged through me in that instant. Fueled by panic, I scrambled out of the truck, intending to give whoever that was a piece of my mind. But as I stepped onto the shoulder, the black figure was gone. Vanished. As far as I could tell, I was the only soul on that lonely stretch of road 4 miles in either direction. Utterly unnerved, I drove only about 5 miles further down the road before pulling over completely, unable to continue. I fell into a fitful sleep, shaken by the phantom figure I'd conjured in my exhausted mind. I don't know why my brain would fabricate such an eerie, life-threatening vision, but I firmly believe it was a hallucination born of extreme exhaustion. Music returns to a more tense, atmospheric quality. I was 13 years old, living in a quiet rural neighborhood. I'd never really struggled with sleep before. In fact, I was renowned for being a notoriously heavy sleeper. It happened on a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning. I'd stayed up late the night before, but nothing unusual. When I woke, or rather, when I thought I woke, I was trapped. A suffocating paralysis held me fast to the bed, my body refusing all commands except the limited movement of my eyes. I strained to lift my head, to break free, but I was bound. Focus, I told myself. I moved my eyes, scanning the familiar room. Then, I looked towards the corner of the ceiling. And I saw it. The most horrifying, bone-chilling thing I had ever witnessed in my entire life. Standing there, impossibly tall, perhaps 8 feet in height, was a figure. Its mouth was split open in a grotesque, permanent grin. Droplets of something dark and viscous, resembling blood, dripped from its lips down to its waist. And in its hand, it held a large, gleaming carving knife. My breath hitched. The figure began to move towards me, not walking, not running, but hovering. It glided across the room, defying gravity, the sound of its impossible movement echoing in my terrified mind. It wasn't walking, not even moving a single limb deliberately. It was just, floating, descending towards me like a phantom assassin. I wanted to scream, to fight, to flee, but I was utterly paralyzed, trapped beneath the crushing weight of sleep's hold. The figure reached the edge of my bed, its presence inches from my face. For the first time, it moved. Its arm, impossibly long, snaked upwards, the carving knife glinting dully as it raised the weapon towards the ceiling, poised to strike. I knew what was coming next. Certain death at the hands of this monstrous apparition. With the last vestiges of my control, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, the pain. Waiting for the inevitable end to happen, but it didn't. Seconds turned into an eternity. No blow fell. I cautiously, tremblingly, opened my eyes. The figure was gone. Instantly, without a sound, just vanished. And with its disappearance, the paralysis broke. I shot up out of bed, gasping for air, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I ran to find my parents, desperate to explain the terrifying ordeal, the phantom murderer that had haunted my paralyzed dream. They listened patiently, their faces etched with concern. Then, my father, a man who rarely showed fear, simply said, "You experienced sleep paralysis, son." The name itself offered little comfort. Sleep paralysis. A state where the mind is awake, but the body remains locked in the transition between sleep and consciousness, often accompanied by vivid hallucinations. I don't know why my mind conjured such a horrific, specific image, but the fear was real, visceral. To this day, I can still recall the chilling, distorted face of that phantom man. Music shifts again, becoming more eerie, perhaps with a hint of childishness. Life as a single mother is exhausting, juggling work and childcare. Often, I have to rely on a trusted sitter to watch my 3-year-old son, Mark, while I work my second job. The drive home, late at night, is usually quiet. But on one particular night, exhaustion began to cloud my senses. I felt myself starting to drift, that familiar lulling sensation creeping over me. I fought it, pinching my arm, shaking my head. Anything to stay awake. The highway was dark, the only lights coming from my dashboard and the occasional passing vehicle. Then, I heard it. A soft, insidious giggling sound, coming from behind me. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. My son, Mark, was sitting there, looking back at me. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. I spun around, expecting to see him in the back seat. But the seats were empty. The car was empty. The giggling had stopped. 10 seconds later, my phone buzzed. It was the sitter. Her voice was tight with panic. "You need to come home." Mark fell down the stairs. He broke his ankle. I was wide awake then, the adrenaline jolt clearing every last trace of drowsiness. I sped home, my mind racing. How could I have heard him in the car? Was it a premonition? A maternal sixth sense? The sitter's frantic call confirmed the danger he'd been in, but the sound of his giggling from the empty back seat of a dark highway remains one of the most inexplicable, terrifying moments of my life. To this day, I firmly believe that mothers possess some kind of innate, sixth sense when it comes to their children, a thread of connection that transcends the physical world. Music becomes more mysterious, slightly unnerving. I live out in the country, not quite desolate, but surrounded by woods and fields. My neighbors are close enough in proximity that we keep an eye on each other's properties, but far enough apart that late-night disturbances are rare. I was home alone one particularly late night, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then, I heard it. A raw, guttural scream echoing from the darkness of the backyard, seemingly coming from the dense woods that bordered our property. My blood ran cold. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen counter, my heart pounding a heavy rhythm in my chest. I cautiously stepped outside, the cool night air washing over me, doing little to calm my nerves. The backyard was pitch black, all the house lights were off, save for the beam of my flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. I swept the light through the trees, searching for the source of the scream, bracing myself for the sight of an injured animal or perhaps a startled raccoon. And then I froze. The beam of my flashlight caught it, a tall, impossibly tall figure standing amidst the trees. It was at least twice my height, a towering silhouette against the darker backdrop of the woods. What struck me most wasn't its size, but its form. It had some kind of elongated, trunk-like appendage hanging from its face, stretching all the way down to its waist, like a grotesque elephant marionette. It wasn't walking, not even standing still, it was moving with a slow, deliberate, unnerving march directly towards the house, towards me. All I could see was profound blackness, no discernible color or features. I instinctively shrank back, then turned and bolted for the safety of the house, slamming and locking the door behind me, my breath ragged. I peered through the glass, straining to see, but the figure was gone. Vanished without a trace. To this day, I sincerely hope that what I saw and heard was merely a product of an overactive imagination, a trick of the darkness, a figment conjured by tired eyes. But the unsettling truth is, I wasn't tired. I was wide awake. And whatever it was, it vanished the moment I sought refuge indoors. Music becomes lighter, almost playful, then twists into something sinister. This next story happened on vacation, years ago. My family and I were staying at a resort nestled deep in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. The setting was picturesque, but strangely devoid of energy. There weren't many young people around, making it feel more like an adult retreat than a family vacation spot. One afternoon, bored and wandering outside the main lodge, I looked up. To my surprise, I saw a teenage girl looking out from a second-floor window. From that distance, she seemed vaguely cute. On impulse, I waved. She didn't react. No wave, no smile, no acknowledgement. Simply, nothing. I shrugged it off, figuring she was lost in her own thoughts or perhaps didn't see me. Later that same day, desperately bored again, I found myself sitting on the swing set at the small, deserted playground near the resort. And that's when I saw her again. Not waving from an upper window this time, but standing a short distance away, down past the playground, near the edge of the trees. She was just standing there, staring directly at me. A strange, unsettling feeling prickled my skin. Being a teenage boy, hormones often clouded judgment, so I pushed the unease aside. Driven by a mix of curiosity and adolescent bravado, I got up and started walking towards her, intending to at least say hello. As I drew closer, however, the initial impression of cute evaporated. Her face, the closer I got, seemed wrong. There was something unsettling about her features, though I couldn't quite pinpoint what. Maybe it was her eyes, they seemed too large, too vacant. Or perhaps her mouth, which held a faint, permanent smirk that didn't quite reach her vacant stare. About halfway there, she turned, and without a moment's hesitation, ran, full speed into the woods, disappearing into the dense undergrowth as if swallowed whole. I stopped dead in my tracks. The girl's sudden, desperate flight felt less like shyness and more like the actions of a freaky stalker. Confused and slightly unnerved, I left it at that. I didn't see her again the rest of the day we were at the resort. During the long car ride home, miles away from Pennsylvania, my thoughts wandered back to her. I wondered what might have happened if I had followed her into the woods. Maybe I could have gotten to know her, or perhaps, something else entirely. But then, something else entirely happened. Glancing ahead on the highway, amidst the passing taillights and the blur of motion, I saw her. Standing by the tree line on the side of the road. And as our car sped past her, I saw her head turn, impossibly fast, to follow us. She was standing there, alone in the dark beside the highway, and her head was twisted around, always looking right at me. Through the tinted windows of the minivan, her gaze felt unnerving, direct. I instinctively grabbed my mother's arm. Mom! Dad! Did you see that girl by the side of the road? Her head was turned all the way around. They both looked at me, then out the window where I pointed. See who? My father asked, glancing back. He looked again, frowning slightly. No, son. I don't see anyone. My mother nodded in agreement, looking concerned. Maybe you were imagining things after that girl ran off earlier? The confirmation that only I had seen her was strangely comforting, yet deeply unsettling. Was it just a vivid memory playing tricks on me after a long drive? Or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadows that night? I pushed the thought away, telling myself it was all in my head, that the girl was never even there. But the image of her unnaturally turned head remained burned into my memory. Music swells with intense dread, then cuts abruptly, leaving silence. I can tell you from personal, harrowing experience, that sleep paralysis is arguably the scariest thing a human being can go through. It's not a dream, it's a living nightmare imposed upon your conscious mind while you are trapped in an immobile body. I was 19 years old when I experienced it, and it was the fourth time in my life. The first three were unsettling, yes, but this fourth episode was in a different league altogether. It was profoundly, terrifyingly worse than anything I had encountered before in my life. I opened my eyes just as the morning sun was beginning its slow ascent, its gentle light filtering through the blinds I must have somehow pulled open in my sleep. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. But the peace was an illusion. I found myself completely, terrifyingly unable to move. My body felt heavy, as if weighed down by invisible chains. The only part of me I could consciously control were my eyes. I turned them, focusing on the corner of my room, a place I always felt safe. And then I saw it. The most horrifying, unforgettable image I have ever witnessed. Standing there, impossibly tall, like a distorted shadow against the wall, was a small girl. But she wasn't right. Her figure was unnaturally elongated. And her face was a study in horror. Her skin, if she had any, seemed translucent or utterly absent. What struck me most, what froze my blood, were her eyes. They were not ordinary eyes. They were entirely black, like empty, bottomless wells staring directly into my soul. And her mouth, it was pulled back in a permanent, unnatural smile, revealing unervingly large teeth. She began to move towards me. Not walking, not running, but taking giant, exaggerated steps, her limbs stretching impossibly far, defying the laws of physics and anatomy. She reached the edge of my bed, her black eyes fixed on mine, and then, she threw her arms around my neck. Not in a hug. In an inhuman, terrifying grip. Her hands, I imagined, though I couldn't see them clearly, clasped around my throat, squeezing the life out of me. I couldn't breathe. The phantom pressure choked the air from my lungs. I thought I was dying. I watched this grotesque, supernatural being choke me within the confines of my own bedroom, and I couldn't do a single thing about it. I was completely, utterly helpless. Pure, unadulterated terror washed over me, paralyzing me even more than the sleep paralysis itself. Just as I felt the darkness of oblivion closing in, as I believed I was taking my very last gasps of air, my hands suddenly snapped up. They didn't feel like my own, they moved with a violent, involuntary jerking motion, slapping my own face hard. The impact was jarring, but it broke the spell. The horrifying little girl was gone. In an instant, she vanished, leaving no trace behind. And just as suddenly, I could move. I shot upright in bed, gasping for air, my body trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs as if I had truly run underwater for a minute, desperately fighting for each breath. I felt completely drained, the phantom pressure on my throat lingering even as I drew real air. The fear was genuine, visceral, and deeply scarring. I had been trapped, watching that grotesque vision of a little girl with her hands around my throat, choking me, almost to death, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I was utterly, terrifyingly helpless.